Hey guys, welcome to our game. I hope everybody got their character sheets and all the info, the intro info I sent them. We're all good,
Dude,
right?
no, dude. First off, I'm so sorry I'm 30 minutes late. I should have called somebody, but shit happens. And I know you emailed me the character sheet, but I kind of forgot it, and I forgot my dice as well. Oh, and I left my book at my baby mama house, and she kind of locked the door on me, and I can't get the book out now. What are we playing again? Oh, and by the way, I know you said something in the email about having $5-10 for food. I ain't got that either. That's not a problem, right?
Well, may, I guess we can figure out. Are you serious? Hey, dude, Rooster. Yeah.
What happened? Oh, sorry, I didn't have my push to talk on, and I had you guys muted, so I couldn't hear anything.
Oh, dude, I've done that before.
So you're not paying attention either.
I mean, I was here on time.
Oh man, that sounds like a shot at me.
I don't know, but anyways,
Okay. Anyway, let's just get into this, guys. Just so you know, I did give you a little information in the email about what was going to go on. But you know what? I had a epiphany last night, and this is going to be great. Right about now, we're about to step into the world of brutality, hard R, nah, make that triple X like torture porn, and we're gonna actually have some heavy sex content in this game as well. This is going to be epic.
um,
Whoa. That's not cool, dude.
yeah, that sounds like a bit much and not really okay. So, with that in mind, let's discuss the do's and don'ts of etiquette in gaming. Hey yo, it's your boy Ancient Albatross here again with the usual suspects from the Cypher Unlimited crew. We have Alpha Dean or AD or just plain Dean. We have Spigs18 or Anthony. And Dean, why are we here today?
Don't be a dick. We're here to talk about not being a dick.
You
So
sure?
Anthony, or Anthony, yeah,
I think there's a little bit more to that, but it's the basic general premise of our discussion. We're going to discuss gaming etiquette, and for the purpose of this video, we broke it down into three groups: gaming etiquette as a player, gaming etiquette as a GM, and finally gaming etiquette as a for online games, because it's definitely a different dynamic playing online as opposed to playing in an actual table with some friends. So I guess we'll start it off, if everybody's okay with it. Could we start it off as a player?
absolutely.
So I think I'll lead it off. I think the first bit of advice or the first bit of good etiquette a player can do first and foremost for first session is show up on time. Better yet, don't show up on time. Show up 15 minutes early. When you show up early, you let the other players know and the GM know that you really want to play and you're really invested into this actual game. So I think the best thing you can do is show up on time, and plus you're around for all the cool banter before the game. You guys could discuss characters. You guys could discuss plot points with the GM. You could discuss how your characters are connected to each other, how your backgrounds work together, and all that could be solved just showing up a few minutes early to the game session,
And
especially for the very first game.
And
and
another, but I was just saying one other thing that's good for it too is also a good recap.
I was
You
gonna
know,
say exactly that. That's exactly what I was gonna say. It's a perfect time if you're in a long running campaign to discuss what happened last time, to discuss what could possibly happen going forward. And that only happens if you come early, because otherwise, if you're on time or late, the game has to start.
And good point. You saying late, like show up early, but if stuff happens and sometimes you have to show up late. If you do, let someone know. Better yet, let two people know, because the more people that know, the better the group can plan together whether they're going to wait for you or not. Add you into the story later on, depending how late you're going to be. And if you're not a habitual latecomer, you know they might actually wait for you.
right.
There's definitely valid points, and on top of that, if you have any issues before the game, you can get them resolved. with that little bit of time if you come early, depending on what your issue might be. Really depends on you as a person. Maybe you forgot something or something of that nature, but this would be a good time to get that fixed and arranged.
And what Al was saying, that's a perfect segue into what we, getting down to. Another good thing is to try to be prepared. Have everything you need to play. If you're, a person who has to have a rule book or, your character sheets, have descriptions of your abilities and everything easily accessible, so you're not holding up the game, with that simple stuff that can be time consuming.
Yeah, because the worst thing is when you're really getting into like a moment or something in a game or a session, and then one player's like, "Oh, wait a second, what does this ability do on my sheet? Like, where is that in the book?" Like, that really drops the immersion, drops everyone's commitment at that point in time, because now we're waiting on this person to figure out their character sheet or whatever have you.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I always tell everybody, I say, you don't have to know all the rules. Hell, you don't even have to know 1/8 of the rules. Just know what's on your character sheet.
Yes.
Right.
That's all you really know. Everything else, could be discussed at the table. Just know what's on your character sheet.
And here's a little piece of advice that I like to give out. Either, you can print that stuff up, make it into little laminated cards. You can write it on 3x5 index cards, or, have a description on your character sheet. But what Anthony is saying is paramount. If you know what's on your character sheet, you know your character's abilities. That's all that's necessary. You don't even have to know how to apply the rules to those abilities, because the GM and other people at the table will make sure that happens. But if you know what that ability does, you're prepared.
Yeah. You don't even have to know how the mechanics work of an ability. Just know what the ability does.
That's exactly it.
But
and that applies to any game system.
Yeah, but that helps me segue into our next point, which is pay attention. Not just to your sheet, not just to what's going. Not to the books or whatever have you, but pay attention to the game that's happening in front of you. That sounds like common sense, but it's really easy to get distracted when you're not the focus of the scene. But you still need to pay attention to those scenes as well, because they're important to the story. Just because your character's not playing a pivotal role in that scene doesn't mean it's not important. That, you always have to be attentive. Otherwise, it just makes you look like a jackass. Just plain and simple. Plain and simple.
My initial point.
I think that's one of the I think that's one of the most common bad behaviors at a gaming table. When someone, I mean, I see that so often. I mean, I think everybody's been guilty of that to some extent, but I think that happens the most, where there'll be a scene with two characters and maybe two other people aren't in the scene, and as soon as the scene over, they'll be like, "Oh, what happened?" Dude, it was a 5-minute scene. You didn't have to listen to it for the whole 5 minutes, but you couldn't pay attention a little bit, and that happens all the time. As a player and as a GM, and go, "Oh, it's your turn. Okay, what happened?"
Yeah. I mean, especially in the day and age we live in now, with all the additional distractions.
Yeah. I mean, that leads into our next point, which is, I think is a good segue, is allow other people at the table to have some spotlight time. Don't be a scene hog, and when you're not in the spotlight, pay attention. Don't be a dick.
but
I was just going to say, wait for your turn.
Please.
Yeah, I mean, again, that sounds like common sense and common courtesy, but you'd be surprised at the amount of people who, when they're, like, it's usually pretty obvious when a GM is trying to spotlight a character. Take that time, like, understand his, like, what he's trying, or what they are trying to put forward, in that they're trying to spotlight these one or two characters. Your character doesn't have to be the star all the time. Sit back, enjoy the show. Like, you don't have to work so hard to put yourself in every single scene.
As I like to describe role-playing games in general, it's interactive storytelling. So that means, guess what? Everybody at the table should be able to be interactive. It shouldn't just be about one person.
And just as a GM, those individual threads, those are the easiest way to do that as a GM to give everybody individual threads for their story is to spotlight someone for 5 minutes. Give them a little bit of time to build their individual narrative out. And if he does that with everyone at the table and everyone respects everyone's spotlight time, you have a more cohesive story.
And and that being said, that's something that's kind of pointed out too in the new book, Your Best Game Ever, and it'll be something that's in the that'll be in the new revised edition of CSR, our character arcs. So that is it's like a double edge, or not even a double edge. It's actually a dual benefit. First of all, it gives the GM seeds to build on, and in the same breath, it gives the player that agency and their spotlight time. So yeah, enjoy it. Enjoy the stories, because guess what? Sometimes you can even, filter your character into that.
Yeah, I think you put it best. Enjoy other people's stories. I think it'll be easier for you to share the spotlight time if you actually become a fan of that person's individual thread.
Yeah. I mean, that's definitely true. Because some of my favorite moments in games aren't when I'm doing stuff or my character's doing stuff. It's watching what other people think of to do for their characters. Yeah. And if you're trying to, again, hog that spotlight, that stuff just doesn't happen because people feel off put by what you're trying to do. The person in the spotlight might feel a certain way about you trying to get in there. They might be a timid person, and seeing you trying to hog their spotlight, they will, without fight, will just retract. Because some people, especially a lot of people in gaming, I don't want to stereotype or anything, but I have seen a lot of people with social anxiety and stuff like that. And when you have social anxiety and someone else is, again, maybe doesn't have it, and they're trying to be the spotlight, if you have that anxiety, it's hard for you to even say something like, hey, what are you doing?
My turn.
It's my turn, yeah. A person with anxiety won't say that. They'll just, in their own head, be like, oh, what did I do to mess up? Like, how was I not, enough for the scene, blah, blah, blah. Right. It really gets into people's heads, and allowing them that space to have that spotlight really helps. Like, it may not seem that way to people without that anxiety, but it really does wonders.
Right. And I mean, before we go on to our next point, I just remember and had to think about it. Anthony's experience. Remember the guy at the New York meetup, the New York CU meetup? He wanted to play everybody's character at the table. Everybody, So that's a prime example. I mean, we've all dealt with it. We've all seen it. And if you got anything else, Ant?
No, I was just to go back on enjoying other people's spotlight time. It made me think of our first GM roulette. My most enjoyable moment of that entire game, I had nothing to do with. But when anyone mentions GM roulette, I always think of the Mayor Stevens character and Deep Pit character. The interactions they had, good. The solo scenes they had were so good. It was the most enjoyable thing I took from any of the GM roulettes we played. Like those individual spotlighted scenes between those two characters, which were many. I think they had like 3. Were my and I was basically a fan watching.
Yeah, same. It was definitely awesome.
It was still my favorite scenes.
And speaking of that, I have to go back to our last GM roulette at Gen Con because what's his name? What was his name? The guy that we played with.
I wasn't there.
Rich?
No, not Rich. No, it was Shire's friend. If you said his name, I would know it. But at any rate, he's on Cypher Unlimited. But his moments as the dodgeball playing kid.
If you take the time and enjoy someone else's character, you're a better player for it, you're a better GM for it, and it's a more enjoyable experience overall.
And I'm gonna just pipe in with this, just to get this point out there. We don't have to touch on it too much, but when these spotlight moments are happening, stay off your phone. Don't use the internet on your phone. Don't browse Facebook. I mean, I'm a human. I've definitely done that at a table before where I'm not in a scene and I'll just look at my phone to catch up on messages. But if you have to do that, keep it to a minimum. Yeah. Like, it just detracts so much from everything that's going on. And on top of that, when you look up from your phone, you have to ask, what happened? And that slows down everything.
And you also distract other people around you because if you're looking at something that's interesting, the person sitting next to you wants to see what it is.
What are you
'cause it's
watching?
interesting.
What are you look? What are you giggling about?
And I mean, I understand that we're not 14 anymore. We're all adults, and we all have adulting to do. There's adult life happening around us. So sometimes emergency happens. Some of us got kids. Some of us got wives. Some of us got jobs that we need our phones. But keep it to emergencies only.
And I'll just add to it in the whole sense of this. We live in an age of far more distraction than when Anthony and I started playing. When I started playing, and then Anthony too, we didn't have the same type of distraction. I mean, back in those days, the biggest thing you had to worry about was the guy in the book.
All I had was a beeper. Hey, somebody beat me. Boom.
See, I didn't even have a beeper, so you already know. Like I said, my biggest one was somebody out read the book.
Somebody's just reading a different book than what you're playing.
Read a different book, or reading the spells. Did you know the ninth level? Dude, we're not talking about ninth level spells right now. So.
Oh man!
I'm gonna say, and I don't know if you guys are realizing it, but this is gonna be my catchphrase for this place. Don't be a dick.
Yeah.
Be kind. People have ideas. You got new people at the table.
That leads into the next point. Why don't you read the next point?
Don't be a dick.
And be kind to others.
Right.
What are you just saying?
Especially with other people's ideas during gameplay,
Yeah, their gameplay ideas. I mean, not just that, but even especially like your new players. Some people get, everybody I talk to, my wife included. My wife was one of those people who was so afraid to sit down. I don't know the rules. I don't know how to do this, because she got intimidated because it was a 400-page book. And I'm like, honey, don't worry about that. And if you are, giving people a hard time about, rules and crap, you may be ruining a potentially great player or a great GM for that matter.
And we're going to say something?
I was just saying, when you kind to others, validate their ideas. Like, you may not agree with someone's idea. It doesn't make it any less important to that person. Even if you don't agree or you happen to think their idea, it's their character. Let people play their character the way they want to. Let them input ideas for the group. And maybe your guys won't use the idea, but don't immediately tell them it's stupid or don't be a dick.
And even on top of that, aside from character decisions or gameplay issues or whatever have you, story stuff, if someone, like, let's say someone decides, hey, this scene is too much or whatever have you, you can't, like, let's say they want to, whatever, X card or whatever have you, stop the scene. You as a fellow player on the table or the GM can't be like, oh, don't be whack. Like, you can't put them down for having those boundaries. Because, again, everyone's feelings and ideas are valid. And if someone is having a difficult time with something that's going on in a scene, it's kind of a dick move to be like, man up or whatever have you, like whatever term you want to use. Because, again, not everybody's comfortable with the things you might be comfortable with.
And be accepting of it.
Yeah. But then now that we had mentioned the character stuff, that leads into the next point, which is let people play their characters. Like, I know I've seen it a whole bunch of times where, I don't know, I forget any instances regarding myself specifically, but I've definitely seen where a player will try to roleplay a character how they see they want to roleplay it, and another person at the table like, no, wait a second. That is not right. Like, we should do this instead. Like, your character would be more beneficial if we did this. And that kind of comes from that mindset of, like, max minning. Because usually when I see that happen, I'm not saying it's 100% of the time, but usually the player inputting this information for how another player should play is usually trying to max min the situation. Whereas like, oh wait, but if you use this ability and you stand at this point, and if you say these words, that maximizes what can happen for us in a benefit. But
I will say this: not everyone is the optimizer.
Yeah, no, not at all.
Some people play role-playing games strictly for the story, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with being an optimizer, but don't shove it down everybody else's throat.
Exactly.
I mean, it's simple as that.
Here's an idea too, and not being funny, but if you're playing a narrative game, get into the story because it's not about the max. It's not about the optimization. It's literally about the story. It's about the characterizations in those moments. Now, if you're playing a game that is system heavy or tactical in nature, I mean, just looking at I've been reading the new Pathfinder 2 book. It's a solid game. It's a pretty awesome damn game. It's different than most stuff that's out there, but it's still a D20 game. And it is one of those things where you can optimize your positioning. And if but don't force it down a person's throat.
Yeah, but it's the other way around too. If you're a bunch of narrative guys and there's one optimizer, don't be a dick to him. If he enjoys being an optimizer, just allow him to do that.
Yeah, by all means, if that's how they
two-way street.
Yeah, if they
absolutely allow everybody to play the game and the character they want to play.
Yeah, allow them to derive joy from their character as long as they're not ruining the game in some way, like a chaotic whatever bad or whatever you want to call it, chaotic evil, just running around doing nonsense. But if they're playing their character in such a way that, again, whether they be narrative or tactical heavy, as long as they're not disrupting the game, it's not really a problem.
To go back on the advice point that you brought up originally, Al, is it's okay to give advice.
Yes.
That's not what we're saying. But wait to be asked. Or if you see a newer player struggling, that's an opportunity for you to give some game advice. But for, when you're with a group of seasoned players, don't tell them how to play their character. Because in your mind, you might be thinking, I'm helping this guy out or gal out. But that person has an idea how they want their character to be. Allow them to do that. It's not your place to tell someone how to play their character. Just like it's not not my place to tell you how to play your character.
And here's another thing. If you really want to get down to the nitty and the gritty, have a discussion, at the beginning of the game or outside of game time with the rest of the players at the table too. And you guys set a precedent of how your table is going to play, and this will help avoid those type of pitfalls as well.
I know I think we had an episode on this, or at least we touched on it in some video, but that's why session 0 is so important. If you're running a long campaign or whatever have you, or even if you're doing a one-shot, it's always good, even if you don't have a formal session 0, at least try to talk with everyone from the table to let them know what you're expecting from this. Especially if you're the GM, you definitely want to have a chat with each of your players, like, hey, this is what I'm planning, blah, blah, blah.
I think at the point in our GM, we'll
go back to that, yeah. But either way, talk it out.
Yeah, and don't be a dick.
And don't be a dick.
Am I going to discuss the next point, or is it Dean?
No, you go ahead, Anthony.
This is an optional point because not everyone enjoys doing this, and I know me personally, I fall victim to not doing this all the time. But if you're the kind of person that enjoy doing this, take notes. One, it's helpful to the players like me that are lazy that don't take notes, and it's excellent for the GM, especially if you're a forgetful person. Because this kind of annoys me sometimes when I run games where you have an important NPC that's been going on with the group for 5 sessions, and the players are still saying, "What's her name again?" You've been dealing with this NPC for 5 sessions, and you still don't remember her name. Somebody just jot down little notes, stuff that would help you later on in the game. One, it makes you seem knowledgeable later on in the game when you know all the key NPC names and locations and places. And 2, it allows you to help out other players when they don't remember. Somebody has to do it. Why not it be?
Exactly.
Well, sometimes I forget who you are too, Anthony.
When I called you earlier, he was like, "Who's this again?" It's like the tall Puerto Rican guy.
Oh yeah, him. Okay.
But those notes definitely do come in handy. Because again, it's especially if you're in a campaign, because 3 sessions later, you might not recall off the top of your head the name of that shop from 3 sessions ago where that important item was or whatever. Like, and it's always, again, like Anthony said, it's impressive to the GM if you, like, instead of saying, hey, what was the name of that shop? Or, hey, what was the name of that NPC? You're like, oh, yeah, we need to find Alex Trebek at the Howling Monkey Inn, and he has the mystical key. Like, you just know all that shit. Like, it doesn't have to be said to you.
It's not only impressive, it's helpful. He doesn't have to backtrack and tell you the story again.
And here's another little thing. GMs, Anthony not included, but a lot of us keep notes. But as a player, having a character notebook, that great new item that Monty Cook Games put out, player notebook, and
be sure to pick one up today.
Or character folios.
It's awesome, by the way.
Or character folios, things like that are extremely helpful to you as a player, and it might encourage the note taking, because if you got this notebook that's your character, then that's what you're going to have with you. So you will always have those little things. So that might be the way to go, because instead of trying to remember to bring an extra notebook, or where did I put those post-it notes, it's all in one place.
So what's our last point for
respect your GM? Appreciate what he's going to do. Appreciate the efforts. So in other words, let's minimize arguments about settings, plots, rules. Help them keep the game flowing, whether it's a narrative game, tactical game, whatever the case may be. If there's a question about a ruling, wait till afterwards, and then you guys can discuss it there. But don't slow the game down by mincing about these things.
Exactly. Oh, I was just gonna say that. I was just gonna say that. Just like Dean said, if there's an argument or whatever have you with a ruling or something like that, at the table when the game is happening, the GM should have the final say, and that should be it. Like, and if you do have an issue with it after the game, you can talk to them. Like, hey, I know you said the ruling on Onslaught was this and this, but if you look at the rules, it specifically says blah blah blah. And then going forward in the next games, you can make that that change, the adjustment, and then there won't be any arguments about it going forward.
I think you guys brought up a great point. First off, I think all three of us are not saying that you can't disagree with the GM. You absolutely can.
Yes.
But there's a right time and a place to do that. Do not do it in the middle of the game. Do not stop the game, because now you're making it all about yourself and not the other 4 or 5 players that playing in the game with you, because now they have to stop and lose their momentum, their focus, their whole immersion into the story to sit here and hear you plead your case to the GM why a certain rule is working or not. So you absolutely have a right to disagree with the GM. Just wait till after the session.
Time and place.
And with every negative thing that you have to say about a GM, if the GM is doing something positive, let him know. Let the GM know, hey, I really love that chase scene. Or, hey, those 2 NPCs you added, I love their interaction with it. It was very enjoyable. I'm going to steal that for my game. Every once in a while, you could give a GM a compliment. It makes them feel appreciated. And it also, not for nothing, it's going to make them work harder for the next session. Because if they know that you're having a good time, they're going to put in more effort.
They're going to put in effort, and, if you're enjoying what they're doing, you got to think about it. You let them know what they're doing right, they're going to continue to do more of that right, and less of what you may not like, And if no one has anything else, I think we beat this portion of the horse to nice tenderness. Let's move on to our next section of this, which is online gaming etiquette.
Set us off, Dean.
Don't be a dick.
That is definitely true.
Yeah, I think that's going to be the common theme.
So, that's my thing. So, but if we're going to get into the little aesthetics, the smaller points, set a game day reminder for yourself. Because online games can get lost in the minutia of life. it's easy, you know, to forget that, you know what, I'm supposed to be online at 7 o'clock. You know, it's not the same as, you know, going to a game store or going to a friend's house. So, you know, set yourself a little reminder of some sort.
Yeah, especially playing with strangers. A lot of times it's especially on the CU where we have multiple games running, and sometimes you play multiple games in a week. It can happen that you lose track of a game that you had planned. Especially with online games, tend to be planned 3 or 4 weeks in advance with strangers, that it might, you know, slip your mind, and nobody likes to be stood up. You know, so yeah, set yourself a quick little reminder on your phone, or you know, on your laptop or your computer, on your calendar. Hey, I'm gaming on this day.
And
That's a point.
oh, on top of that, because we discussed what is it, being on time or whatever, setting a reminder, set an alarm if you have to, write a date in your calendar. But on top of that, when you do seek to play in a game with these people you may not know, it's always good to present what your time zone is, know what their time zone is.
This happens all the time on our server.
Yeah, like because we're an international service, so people are from Europe, from Asia, from all over the world. And when you look at a post or whatever have you, or anywhere, not just on the Discord, but like let's say you're using Roll20 or whatever have you. I'm not sure if they list the time zones, but either way, it's always good to be sure of what time zone you're playing your game in. So like let's say it's 7 p.m. 7 p.m. where? Like you need to know exactly when to be on, because again, you don't know, this person might be 10 hours ahead of you, whatever have you, and it's always good to know those details before, you know, committing.
You know, one thing I learned from playing online, because I'm an old grognard, and I've only been like recently in the last 5 years playing online. I learned the importance now is to state my name, my pronouns, and what my time zone is.
Very key information.
And when I look at other people trying to contact me to play the games, that's what I look for. I look for their name, their pronoun, how they want to be addressed, and what's their time zone. Yeah. You know, because it's easy to tell someone, hey, you know, yeah, I love to play with you, but you know, you do know we're 12 hours apart, or we're 10 hours apart. Right. So
we get it all the time, and that's one of the other things. You know, just be cognizant of that. You know, people, you know, you got some people who do make sacrifices to be in our games, so that I think that's very important. You know, in the whole respecting the time zone that, you know, people are playing in and everything else, because some people do make sacrifices. Some people get up early in the morning to run for, you know, some of our friends overseas, or they're playing late at night to run, and vice versa.
We used to have a friend, James, that used to run Traveler for us, and he lived in Thailand. He was a retired military man that moved to Thailand. He used to have to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning to run Traveler for us. And some people would not appreciate that. But he was literally getting up at the crack of dawn to run Traveler for a bunch of Americans, you know?
Right. You know, and that, you know, I mean, and I've done it. I've gotten up early on my days off, you know, 7, 8 o'clock in the morning. You know, I'm running a game by, you know, 8, 9 o'clock in the morning. It's crazy when I think about it, but it's cool. You know, and I would do it again, you know, because, you know, we're here for the same thing. We're all here to have a good time. So, you know, let's stay aware of that.
And just to keep it going, something that ensures that everyone has a good time is to check your microphone and camera if you're using video to play. Because if you join up like last minute, like you're right on time, but now you're having mic issues, it just delays it even further.
You should be checking your microphone an hour or 2 hours before the game. You should be checking your camera an hour or 2 hours before the game. Especially if you're playing at home in your underwear, like most people do when they play it online.
Like this. No.
You know, it takes you 5 minutes to double check your microphone. And we're giving like the worst advice, because we don't even follow that when we're shooting these videos.
We sure don't.
Let's not just say your microphone and your camera. Let's just make sure you check all your equipment.
Yeah.
Yes, your computer, your phone,
internet, the whole nine. Because shooting our videos, we have all three of us have been guilty of some
Technical disability.
As you may have heard in previous videos.
You know,
Good thing we don't edit. We also don't edit, so they can just go back and watch the past video.
I mean, listen. Like I said, I have truly gotten in the habit though of making sure everything is good to go. You know,
and with checking your microphones, I can't stress this enough. When you're playing online, most online games may not have cameras, so they don't see what you're doing in the background. But keep the background noise to a minimum. And it's okay if you're playing in a room where other people are playing. Other people are watching TV or whatever. But then use the push to talk option.
Yes.
Don't assume that it's okay for not only the GM but the other players to hear, Benny Hill in the background.
well, see, here's the deal. A lot of people.
Or the last episode of Game of Thrones.
Right, and I don't think a lot of people realize that even, a bottom of the barrel basement store microphone is leaps and bounds better than anything we had 10 years ago. So those things do pick up. Even the built-in microphones built right into your computers are sensitive, and they will pick up background noise. They will pick up, that incessant chatter of the television. I mean, I remember when we first started out, until I figured stuff out, my microphone was picking up my sump pump going off.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, I remember we were playing with somebody. I don't remember who it was, but it wasn't a regular. But they were eating some sort of chips, and for some reason on my headphone, it was like explosions going off. Like every time they were.
That was me.
And I was like, "Yo, dude,
Anthony, that was me. That was an Al's pirate game.
You guys have amazing memory because I don't remember this at all.
And all I remember, it was like, yo, what the hell is going on? So,
that was me. That's when we first started playing.
Like, you don't even follow your own Game of Etiquette rules.
Hey, no, I followed it now because I didn't realize that you were hearing my chips.
But yeah, that's also a part of etiquette. Is people are humans. Where everybody makes mistakes. Everybody has have gone and done the things we have talked about. All of us included. Us three, everybody who's listening to this probably have done one or another thing. But the important thing is not that you made these mistakes, is that you learn from them going forward. And like Dean said, he didn't realize that this was an issue like at that time, but now he's aware of it and has stopped it.
Yeah, and you know what it is? That's a specific online gaming etiquette because at a table eating Funyuns with your friends, that's part of gaming.
Yeah, like you can't push the talk in real life. Like
but it's not a big deal.
It's
either.
ambience.
You don't notice it because you're all munching out.
Yeah,
but online, with the sound is amplified, it makes a difference.
Yes.
And I think that should bring us to our last point with the online gaming etiquette. No different than coming to a table. Have what you need there. Have a physical character sheet before game day or have your online character sheet ready to go. Make sure you have your tools of the trade. So guess what? We can jump into this thing because unlike, sitting at a table, you can't just reach over in your bag or something like that, especially if you're playing on camera or if you're, recording it or something like that. So have all your stuff.
This is a lesson we learned the hard way, and I'm happy we put this specific online rule in there because this has happened to us multiple times. We, especially early on when me and Al were first getting onto Roll20, we would have all our character sheets, everything set up on Roll20, right? And then something happens, Roll20 goes down, or Fantasy Grounds goes down, and all the character sheets, all the notes, everything is on Roll20. So as long as the players have their character sheet, we can still theater of the mind style it. Okay, we don't got the maps that we had, but guess what? The game doesn't stop. We'll just talk it over Discord. You have your character sheet. You have actual dice. Let's rock and roll. You know what I mean? Right. And I learned that the hard way by having it actually happen.
Right. Absolutely.
So I think that's really sound advice. You know, like even if you're playing a Roll20 game, just spend a few minutes to write out. You don't have to write everybody's character sheet, but write yours out. And if
And you don't necessarily have to write it down. Have an offline copy somewhere. Like copy, take a screenshot, put it on Google Docs or whatever have you, just so that you're not limited to that one or two sites, like Anthony said, like Roll20 Fantasy Grounds. Because when they go down, or not that it happens often, but it is a possibility that you can't access that stuff. And if you want to play, you need that information. So having an offline copy or physical copy helps.
yeah, or even not even having access to it. Sometimes you're playing with someone whose laptop isn't strong enough to run it, or whatever the case may be. Roll20 might still be running, but you still want a game. They can still game off their phone.
Yes.
You know.
Yeah.
Hey, I think one of the first times we met Dean, he gamed off his phone.
I did.
I worked.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, he wasn't on Roll20. He had his characters. He had his character sheet. He had actual dice, and he gamed off his phone.
It was fun. Hey,
Yeah.
like I said, I couldn't
What?
access it. It was like it was something. Roll20 was being
Yeah.
funky, and I couldn't access it at work. So yeah, I used my phone, and we
Yeah,
had a
your
blast.
character. Yeah.
So
I guess so that leads us into etiquette for GMs. And since we all GMs, I think we've all been guilty of everything we're going to say here. I guess I'll lead it off. And oh no, we'll let Dean lead it off. Dean, what's the number one rule?
don't be a dick.
Okay. Don't be a dick is the number one rule. Follow closely by respect your players. Allow them to have input, not only in their characters, which you should be interfering with to begin with, but allow them to have some input for the aspect of your world. Let them feel invested in their world, so it's a group story, not you jamming whatever narrative you want down their throats. Have an X card available, because what might be not so graphic to you or not so offensive to you might be offensive to others, and respect others' opinions on that matter. And last but not least, be willing to remove unwanted scenes.
It's like what I said earlier in the video. If someone, doesn't matter who at the table, decides, hey, this scene is too much, you just skip it, find a way to narratively go blackout or whatever have you. And it's extremely rude and in bad taste to be like, you know what, you need to man up or whatever have you, and just do the scene anyway. That's extremely messed up, and you should definitely not do that. Because people have boundaries for a reason. You don't know what happened in their personal history. Maybe they were abused. Maybe they went through some other sort of trauma that they don't want to relive in a game. Like, it's okay to have those aspects built into your game because some people enjoy it. Like, you enjoy overcoming these challenges or whatever have you. But when they become a trigger for people's anxieties, that's when it's a no-no.
Yeah.
And I was just going to say, if you have something that's a common trigger, like, I hate to use rape because I never want to see rape in any game, but let's say bestiality or something like that, right? You have a common trigger that, come on, 9 out of 10 people.
No, I'm just laughing because it's just funny that you just picked that. My wife found an article. I don't know how true it is, but they were saying that marrying animals was now legal in Denmark or something.
What?
Yeah, I don't know if it's real or not because I haven't had a chance to check it.
But you know, like if that's what your story is gonna have a scene based around that, right? Even though we all know it's ridiculous, it's not something any of the three of us
unnecessary, but yeah.
You should state that beforehand because come on, dude, unless you're living under a rock, you would know that that's something that's going to trigger someone.
Yes.
And here's the other thing I wanted to add to all of that. Anthony said something else earlier about allowing players to have some agency or in the aspects of the world. One of the ways I do that, one of the ways that I think, would add for everyone is just have players come up with a paragraph of background. If they just give you a paragraph of background story, that is more than enough for you to take and add something into the world that makes them a part of it.
Even if it's like a 3 to 4 sentence paragraph, it does not have to be lengthy. Because usually when people write stories, they, even without knowing it, they'll write a location, they'll write an NPC name, they'll write some kind of mystical artifact in there somehow. And it's, again, I don't know what people's writing processes is, but even if you're just naturally writing a story and you're not an amazing storyteller, those elements come into play naturally. When you're telling a story, there's a location, there's a person. It just happens naturally.
Your guys know my GM.
I'll give you guys a prime example of that. I had a guy literally write. His character's name was Jed. Jed was in the dark because his brother was a jerk. That was his background story. So I had Jed being afraid of the dark, and I had his brother. And his brother was a jerk. So guess what? This was a great NPC to throw in there at some point to get, to pull that Jeb character deeper into the narrative. And it gets dark every night. So that was another piece of the tool. It was great.
Did you have a house rule for the darkness? Because that leads us into our next segue of our next rule and tip. If you ever, as a GM, every GM has house rules, and every GM slightly, or I wouldn't say every GM, but most GMs slightly change mechanics for whatever system it is to best fit their playing style, which is fine. Like I said, most of us do that. But state that beforehand, either in the session zero or when you're advertising your game. Because if a player wants to play a specific game and they show up at your gaming table expecting to play a specific game, whatever house rules you add, you should tell them in advance and let them decide whether or not they want to play in a game that uses those house rules.
Yeah, because those house rules, if you spring it on them last second, it might make them feel a certain way because they built their character a certain way. And now, depending on what rule is getting changed, it might alter their abilities or what they can do. And it might just sour their whole taste on what's going to happen going forward because they weren't given that time to process those rules, those change of rules, to modify their character to fit that.
And this is why I tell people, for the most part, if you want, if that's what you're looking for, or should I say, if that's not what you're looking for, then organized play in most systems is where you want to go, because they have all the rules blocked out. This is what is acceptable. This is what's not. It's one of the reasons, hey, you got to give credit where credit is due, but it's one of the reasons why Adventures League is so successful.
But that's the perfect example of gaming etiquette, a GM etiquette. They're giving you a list of rules right beforehand. You know what to expect. Right. You know what to expect from the GM. And maybe not the GM's personal playing style, but you know the rules.
Exactly. And, I started doing it years ago. I used to give out, a pre-campaign handout for all my players. The biggest one I ever had was like a 40-page.
What?
Yep. Pages of basic canon that you needed, from house rules to world etiquette to the whole nine. I gave it to them before they ever made a character. This way, they could even take stuff from there to help them make their characters. But everybody knew what they were getting into when they walked through that door. And we were all on the same sheet of music. And if they needed a change or something was not working for them, we could discuss it. I was always open to that.
And as a player, I would appreciate that. Maybe not 40 pages, but I would appreciate knowing where you stand up front, because then you allow me to decide whether or not this is the game for me.
And you would appreciate those 40 pages.
I don't know, maybe like 8. And then I would have told you I read the rest.
No. Did you hear what I just said? You would appreciate those 40 pages.
But anyways, this kind of leads into the next thing where, again, there's that little conversation between the GM and the player. And even though you're the GM, you shouldn't treat that as a dictatorship type role where you put your foot down and that's that. Again, we discussed it earlier where there's a time and place to have these little arguments or talks. But as the GM, you have to be aware of when a player wants to have that talk and have that talk. Don't just shut them down and be like, no, it's how it is and that's it. because that'll push people away from wanting to play with you. If there's not that, it's like with any game you play. It doesn't have to be tabletop game. Literally any game you play. If there's not that discussion of like, hey, is this okay? Hey, can we use these items or whatever have you? It's really gonna push the player away because they're not having that input into what's making it fun for them.
Yeah, and as a player, if you don't feel like your opinions are being utilized or have any sort of or valid in any sense in the GM's eyes, it makes it not fun. You're no longer a character in the story. You're a puppet on a stage.
Right.
Yes.
I absolutely 100% agree with that one.
But yeah, you got to remember that it is a collaborative story. Whether you focus on the tactical side or the narrative side, it's still a story or a game you're playing together. And if you don't collab or cooperate or have that give and take with your discussions, then it becomes more like what Anthony said. You're a puppet in someone else's story, whereas just you don't have any like input into how things change. It's basically set in stone what's going to happen, and
Once again,
that takes away the fun.
yeah, that takes away the fun. And the other thing you don't want to do, as we're talking about that, is don't have. I think Anthony's experience, I know I have. We talk about the GM who will have a discussion with himself because he's playing two NPCs.
Oh.
Yeah, those things. Those are things you leave at the door. Leave elsewhere. I know you have a vision in your mind, but like we said, it's collaborative. This is supposed to be everybody gets a turn. In that reality, that even this can be applied to anything. I don't think people actually realize, that it can be applied to anything. It's like even with cards, people make rules up. Like if you play spades, some people have, the deuce of diamonds and deuce of spades, and along.
You don't use the deuce of diamond and spades.
I'm just saying, exactly. You know what I'm saying? So you got to have that discussion so everybody knows where we stand.
First off, I'm right there with you, Dean. I grew up in building. Spades is a serious thing, brother. If you don't know how to play spades, you're in trouble.
Got problems.
And I personally play with the deuce of diamonds, but I know a lot of people that don't. So I'm there. I'm right there with you. But to go back into the story, I think that's to quote Dean, that's the biggest dick move a GM could play. Nice cup. That's the biggest dick move a GM could play is when you all seeing total control, dictator, iron grip over the gaming table. It's your rule of the highway. That's the least enjoyable game for me. I don't want to be anybody's puppet. I want to contribute to the story. And personally, I feel like that's the biggest dick move a GM could.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's like you mentioned this story once in another video, where that that give and take of having the players do stuff or whatever have you was kind of just ripped away by that GM who had his
right back.
Gotcha. But I'll just keep talking. He had, because I know you know the story too, Dean, where he had a GM who had that player like I don't know what you call it, GM PC, where he was essentially a party member as an NPC, and then towards the end, the whole time, from what I've been told, that this GM PC basically had the spotlight the whole time. Like he's the one who had the vital information. He's the one who had the vital weapon to kill the big bad guy at the end. Like all that stuff. Write a novel. Write a damn novel. Like if you don't want people to have the ability to change the story you're writing, you don't want to play a TTRPG. You want to write a novel. And you want to have an audience for your novel. That's messed up. You need just sit down by yourself and write a novel. And then the story can go exactly how you want.
So I guess
my son wasn't following video etiquette. He tried to pull my Ethan. Okay. Yeah, I gotta hold on. I'm gonna have Dean call him in a few minutes. Be like, don't be a dick, 3-year-old.
How old is your son?
3.
Oh, okay, so for him, listen. Don't be a PP.
But yeah, just to go back on track, just if you wanna, as the GM, if you wanna have total say over everything and every outcome, write a book.
Well,
Write a
again,
book.
that just goes on to where when we talked about before. As a GM, the biggest thing for you to remember, is that everything you wrote doesn't mean a thing because the players are going to do the absolute opposite. You have to learn some flexibility. You know what? Like I said, I'm never, we used to always say, don't put it down on railroad tracks. Don't put it on. Yes, put it on tracks, but just make sure it's a roller coaster.
Oh, wait, this way.
Make sure it's a roller coaster because that way, if they go left and you wanted them to go right, guess what? You can bring them back around to that right hand turn. They're just going to be coming around from the left.
Exactly.
So, I think that's a good way to head into our last section. That's be prepared. Have everything you need for the game at game time. That means adventure notes, dice, monsters, book, pre-gens, maps, whatever you need, decks of cards. It doesn't make a difference. Have what you need, and if you're not the type of GM that has, improv skills or something like that, state that up front, but
or vice versa.
Yes.
Right. And vice versa. Definitely vice versa.
Because like you both just said, if a player comes to a game without being told anything, the usual norm is there's a map, there's figures, whatever have you. But if you're doing theater of the mind and they show up and they're not aware of this, I know for a fact that some people just can't do it. They don't have the, I don't know, I don't want to say they don't have the imagination because these people still have imagination, but they can't picture like what's being described. They need those squares, they need those figures. And
it's just how they process information.
Exactly. People process stuff differently.
And that's totally okay. You should state it ahead of time. If you're on either side of the fence, if you're a very tactical GM that you want maps, you want exact distances, you want grids, you want to count arrows, you want to count bullets, that's fine. But state that, because some players that dig that are going to want to play your games. But then there's players that don't dig that, they're not going to want to play your games. And it works the other way around. If you're an improv GM and you have very little notes and you have zero maps and it's all using your imagination, state that. Because some tactical players, guess what? They might not want to play your game, and that's all right too. There's enough game for everyone.
Yep.
Exactly.
And speaking of games, one of the I think is like one of the biggest etiquettes to follow as a GM is to be fair and impartial. Give everyone an equal opportunity to get the spotlight, to make choices and all that stuff. And again, be impartial about it. Just because you might like a certain character in the game doesn't mean they should get the spotlight most of the time. You still got to spread that around equally so everyone has as much fun. Just because you like the flowery talking bard as opposed to the hardcore barbarian or whatever have you, doesn't mean that all your scenes should be where you're trying to convince somebody to do something or there's lots of talking involved. Give that barbarian a time to shine with some door to break down or something heavy to push or whatever have you. Just because you might not like those elements of a barbarian breaking stuff or, fighting doesn't mean that the player shouldn't get the chance to do that.
Right. You know what? Here's a, I don't know how you want to put it, but that's part of the discussion that should happen. Are you playing with a group that's RP heavy, that loves RP more than they love combat? Are you playing with a group that all they're waiting to do is roll their dice? Then those are the things that should be discussed again. That vaunted session 0 we talk about. That's something that's such an imperative because
that's a great point. But just to go back from a player etiquette advice, be honest with the GM.
Right, because absolutely.
A lot of times, and I have players tell me that they want a specific experience. I'm a thespian. I like to get into my character. And then when you actually get them at the table, and when somebody tells me that I'm a method actor, you know, that I have to be. Now I'm thinking of specific. This is the kind of game I'm gonna give you.
Yes.
Right.
You know, and if that's not you, it's fine. Be honest.
Yes.
Because you helping the GM give you their best.
I can go back to a group that I used to run for, I love this group because they were a group of the most honest people you ever want to meet. I mean, they really didn't have filters, but one of the things that they dug, that was their thing, was they did really dig RP. But you could always tell after a certain point, after we would play 2 or 3 sessions that would be like RP heavy, probably minimal to no dice rolling. And then they would actually start something in game so they could roll dice because they would get an itch. It's like, we got to break something. I mean, and they would like go to towns and start trouble just so they could fight. And I'm like, okay, you guys are ready for some encounters now. But it was great.
Another thing about being fair and impartial, I think there's something. Yeah, look, we have a little kid here.
Guest star. GMI.
What's his name? That's our.
That's Ethan.
Mm-hmm. But you were saying, Anthony?
I said about being fair and impartial is that I think that's a common mistake that doesn't normally, like, that isn't a dick move.
No.
I think that it's a mistake that most people make because some players are more active than others.
Yes.
And it's still an etiquette problem because as a GM, you should make a conscious effort to get everyone involved. But I don't think that that's one of those, I'm doing this on purpose. I think most GMs make that mistake not on purpose. It's just that certain players bring out the best of a GM.
Oh, no. I'm not saying it in that sense. I'm saying in a sense like what we were just saying. We have to be conscious of the other people at the table. Don't forget about the other people. I know I make it a point. Yeah, I played with tons of people, and it's crazy because, I'll catch myself. Like you said, you get that person that engages you and they trigger something in you, get you going.
Yeah.
Like, okay, wait a minute. And like, I think we've all done it. Like, especially when we're running our one shots, we'll go, hold that scene. Boom. Let's go to here. Okay, we're going to come back to you because.
But as a more experienced GM, you learn to do that. But when you're first getting started, sometimes you're like, oh, this person is really riffing with me. And they moving my story forward.
Exactly.
I'm going to stick with them just a little bit longer. And as an experienced GM, you learn to be like, even though you feel that connection, that bond, that the story is moving, you have to break that bond for a second and force yourself to, give
somebody else a shot.
Yeah, give somebody else a shot. And it's a hard thing to do, but that's why we GM.
Yep.
Exactly. And you know what? I think that's a good place to give our final thought, our final just respect everyone. Be welcoming. Let people come to the table, and be who they are. And we all know that sometimes, personalities clash or whatever the case may be. But again, that's that honesty that we have to have. And that's just, again, being respectful. You know what? Maybe you make it through that session. Maybe you don't. Maybe you have to pull the person to the side and speak. But as it all boils down, the final thought is, don't be a dick.
Yeah. And I'm just going to add one caveat to that. It's okay to agree to disagree, and some people are just not meant to play with each other.
It's true.
And I know it's hard to hear, but I give that advice to a lot of people that ask, oh, hey, this person is a problem player. They doing all this. Oh, this person's a horrible GM. Find another GM. Find another player for your game.
Yep.
You don't have to take it personal on either side of the fence, and you don't have to be personal with that person because they can't game with you. But hey, not everyone likes the same things, and as soon as we all figure that out, it's a better gaming atmosphere for everyone.
Most definitely. So what it really all boils down to, I think we could basically summarize everything in a quick little sentence. Communicate. That's literally all it boils down to. Just talk to each other. Like, a lot of people, again, I know a lot of people who have social anxiety or whatever have you, and it's hard to have those talks. But at the same time, even if you have those anxieties, you have to realize that you have to talk. Like, especially if you're feeling in a negative way, you have to let them know, because we're not mind readers. We can't tell what's going on in your head if you're not talking. And it's just plain and simple.
Don't be Peter Johnson.
Who?
Peter?
Peter.
Oh! All right. And I think that's a good place to close this out.
Yeah, Al legitimately said, "Who?"
Because you guys are always throwing names out that I don't know. So I don't catch these things right away. But either way, this has been a great talk. Hopefully you all have learned something. Maybe you've spotted a habit that you have that's bad and you can learn to correct it. Because again, it's not a bad thing to make these mistakes. It's a bad thing to not learn and improve.
That's true.
And any advice we gave here, I know we all Cypher system guys, but this is all system agnostic.
Yes.
It applied to any system. Like there isn't anything that we gave you, any advice that we gave that's directly related to any particular system. I think all this is universal across the board to help you on any system. Etiquette is etiquette. Manners are manners.
Reality is, especially like Anthony and myself, we've played more games than a few. We just happen to be Cypher guys right now. But we've played a little bit of everything, and it does. It goes across the board.
But with that being said, thank you all for watching. Be sure to like, share, subscribe. Hit that little bell down below to see when we get those new videos out, because don't want to miss this amazing content that we produce. I couldn't even say that with a straight face. But anyways, it's been a blast. Be sure to follow us, and you'll see the next stuff we put out. And we got some really nice stuff coming for you in the future. So any last words, gentlemen?
I love you guys. Bye.
And with that, from us at the CU, we'll see you later.